Okay, well, welcome to the AI Academy for Business Owners. You're in the yellow belt, which is session number 3. Welcome to everybody. Want to start off by celebrating some wins this week. So we're going to do this every week now that we're into sort of that certification stepping stones. We want to recognize those that have actually completed their certification. So Chris has submitted his certification for the white belt. So well done, Chris. You want to give us a quick rundown on some of the things you did as part of your work on the white belt? Yeah, you just said you've gone down the rabbit hole. So maybe just give us a quick introduction to some of the things that you've been learning and applying with this AI stuff. You may be muted, Chris. You are muted. You still there, Chris?
Yep. Sorry about that. Yeah. So after our meeting, I got down the rabbit hole. I did a lot of research and I was playing around with the AI. And one of the things we did is, so I work for an accounting firm and we have bookkeepers that send out template or emails to our clients. So we have email templates already stored. And I use AI just with some simple commands to rewrite our templates to our clients with just some key points that we want in there. And I think we hit about 10 different email templates within 10 minutes.
Great.
So that was great. Yeah. And then just out of practice, I threw in some profit and loss without the company name because I just didn't want to give private information. And the AI was able to review the financials with trending analysis, with variations, and gave some key changes and concepts to look for with forecasting. So I was overly impressed that something that takes me an hour to review was done within less than a minute.
Yeah. So I've found that when you throw in sort of high level financial statements, the comments you get back are incredibly generic. If you
Right.
give it, say, 12 months analysis,
Hmm.
the feedback you get is way more relevant.
Yeah. And that's what I did.
Again,
I
it's
did like,
about building context.
yeah. And then what's great is I did a trending. And then when it kicks it out, if there's more needed, for example, it came out and I said, please add margins, and it rewrote it with margins. And,
Yeah.
if you want to take out stuff, and it's great. I love it. So I'm
Excellent.
excited to hear more.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Well, we're gonna dive deep on a few more of those areas today. So well done, Chris. Just a reminder to all of you that in order to get the certification, the black belt certification, you do need to have submitted all the belts. Don't have to do them on time. I'm not suggesting that you're out of the running, but as we move forward, I would encourage you to go through and submit that certification week by week as best you can. So again, just that reminder here, submit your certifications. Okay, well, let's do a quick recap of what we covered last week. So I sent you a quick summary, and here are the 4 key prompt ideas that we covered last week. Last week was just a really generic introduction to particularly ChatGPT, but large language models in general. So we looked at the different input-output modes that we can do. And one of the interesting things we did there was we gave it an image and we said, explain this image or give me a list of items from this image. And that was really useful. We just had a generic, give me an introduction to name a topic. And it was able to give us a very concise and useful introduction to whatever topic we asked about. We started looking a little bit at context. We talked about making your prompt longer, giving it as much detail as possible. If you ask a generic question, you'll get a generic answer. So don't ask generic questions. The closest thing here in terms of relevance to say a Google search here would be what's known as a long tail keyword. The more keywords you put into your Google search, the more relevant the results are likely to be to your specific need. If you just type in a very high level keyword, then you're going to get lots of results, most of which won't be relevant to you. And that's the same with AI. Make your prompt longer, give it more information. We're really going to play with that today. And number 4 was specify how you want the information presented. So we even had a situation there of giving the sample output and seeing that it can actually give us the information in the way in which we want to receive it, not the way it wants to give it to us. So that can be very powerful. We're going to explore that a little more in the Greenbelt session. Okay, so that's what we learned last week in our white belt. So let's jump into our yellow belt session. And this session is all about learning to use AI as your prompt engineer. This is not a course about creating prompts. This is a course about how to use AI in your work. And one of the key things that Simple is really convinced of here is that you don't need a course in prompt engineering. AI is the best prompt engineer in the world. All we need to do is learn how to ask it to give us the right prompts. So that's really our focus today. How do we help the AI tell us what to ask it? Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. We've got a few steps we'll go through. We're going to look at a productivity canvas. We're going to talk a lot about creating contexts. We'll then, look at how that translates into prompts, and then we'll look at how AI can be its own reviewer. So those are some of the steps we're going to go through in today's class. So AI as your prompt engineer, introduction. So before we jump in, you will want to have your AI role plan available. You will also want to have the assets for today's session. Mahin, if you could drop that Word document in the chat, just for those that haven't had a chance to log in and download it yet. You will want that to do all the copying and pasting. And you may want a text document or an open document to do some copy and pasting into if you feel like it, not necessarily required. I want to remind you of our 3 mindsets. First mindset is work on your work. You're going to get much better learning if you work on something that you are already doing, like Chris was doing, rather than if you work on hypotheticals or something for a client or a customer. Okay, work on your work. That's how it's going to make the most sense to you. AI first. So one of the things that we want to start training you to be thinking of, and as Chris has got the bug, I can tell, is when you come to a task, think, how can AI help me with this task? Before you think, what do I need to do to get this task done? I've got a really funny story to tell you. I was with my accounting team last week. Most of our team members are in Pakistan. So my colleague Mario and I go to Pakistan a couple of times a year, and we do an all hands meeting, and we do some, we were doing a team building exercise. And so we gave them a task to do as part of this team building exercise. And we printed out the page, we gave them the page, and we said, right, go to it. And at the end, we came back and we debriefed. And so the first team that reported back says, well, we photographed this page and put it into AI, and we asked it for the answers, and it gave us the answers. And my first reaction was to be angry with them and to say, well, that wasn't the intent of the exercise. And I had to stop myself, because just the week before, I had said to them, no one will get in trouble in our firm for using AI. We want you to think AI first, and we now give you permission to use AI. So I couldn't tell them off, because they had done exactly what I said. They had gone AI first. Wasn't the point of the exercise, but we got, they got the right result, and they were using AI. So I want to give you guys permission to start using AI everywhere you can. You might not get the best results the first time out of the box, but that's part of the learning. How do I improve my results? But if you don't think AI first, you only think of AI last, it'll be an afterthought, and you won't really capture those moments where AI could help you. I'll skip the daily growth journal because that's not currently available to you. We'll come back to that maybe next week. Okay, so looking at this thing called a productivity canvas. This is going to be, as I said earlier, Chris, this is one of the money shots in this program. And welcome, Charles, who's just joined us. When we think of a task is very rarely one step. A task is usually a series of steps. So Chris used the example of reviewing financial statements. Well, there's a number of elements in that task. First of all, we have to get the financial statements. That's preparing the financial statements is a whole series of steps all by itself. But first we have to get the financial statements. Then we have to review the financial statements. Then we have to capture the insights or the questions that we've raised as a result of that. And then we might have to present them to a customer. Okay, so Chris works for an accounting firm like me, and so those are some of the regular steps that he would have to do. And so we want to be thinking when we're looking at adopting AI, ultimately, our end goal is to say, what are the steps required for me to deliver this task, and which of those steps can be delegated? So we have this thing called the productivity canvas. Now, this looks a little complicated. Let me explain it. This helps us visualize how we can create a deliverable. The deliverable is the end product. Okay, in Chris's example with financial statements or monthly reports, the deliverable might be comments and insights on the financial statements. Okay, that's a deliverable. We want to give the client some feedback on their financial statements. So how do we get to that? Well, it's broken down into a number of steps. So here we can see that. How do you do it today? Well, you've got these different steps you go through, and you go through these step by step by step by step by step, and you get to the deliverable. And depending on how big that task is, maybe that task is 100 hours. Maybe your effective rate, and we just use sort of $100 or $150 an hour as an example in these demos. It might be $150 an hour. Well, that means that project, that deliverable, cost you $15,000. But let's say that you didn't have to do all those steps. Maybe you could actually break this down into 3 layers. The first layer, or the first swim lane, is stuff that you have to do, you being the knowledgeable expert. The second swim lane could be a cheaper assistant. So this could be, in Chris's case, he's a senior person. Maybe the bookkeeper can do some of the preparation. Maybe it's an admin person or a virtual assistant. Okay, so Charles has got Nissy. So Charles, what can Charles do? What can he delegate to Nissy? And he's really great at delegating stuff to Nissy. But Nissy's still expensive. So what could we then automate with AI? And so when we're looking at this productivity canvas, we're asking this question, instead of me having to do everything, what is the minimum amount of work that I have to do in the process to get to the goal? What could someone else do that frees up my time and is cheaper than me? And what could we have AI do as part of this process? And so it might not be as simple as this, where AI does all the stuff in the middle before it comes back to the assistant and then back to me. Maybe it's going up and down a few times, where the assistant jumps in and does a few things, but AI can do a whole bunch of stuff in between the assistant. Okay, and I was actually doing a task just the other day, and I was thinking of because I'd just been presenting this model, and I was thinking, man, there's so much of this task that if I had the right data and the right script, AI could do this for me. It could be done before I have to actually review this financial information and take the next step. Okay, so we want to start thinking about process and what can be delegated. Now, our goal ultimately is to automate as much as we can with AI and delegate as much of what's left as possible, so that this course is ideally for business owners, so that you can take what may have been 100 hours down to 1 or a quarter hour reviewing the final product. That's our ultimate goal. Now, maybe that's too extreme. In this example here, you can see we've said, hey, about a quarter of an hour for you, maybe a quarter of an hour for the admin to start the task and to gather the results to get back to you. Maybe that admin's worth $20 an hour. Of course, the AI is effectively free. There is a cost to the AI, but it's negligible. So, we had a project that used to cost us $15,000. Well, now, our cost for us here is less than 50. Cost for our admin time is 5. So we're looking at about maybe a $55, into cost to now deliver that project instead of 15,000. Well, that's an ROI that I think every one of us would like to make. That's why I call this analysis, this productivity canvas, the money shot, because this really shows us the levels of efficiency we can get to. Now, I have to admit, that's a pretty extreme example. I don't see too many, effects where we can go from 15,000 down to $5 or $55. That's probably unrealistic. But we do see where we can shave 30%, 50%, 70% off the amount of time from you, the business owner, or a senior person by both delegating and automating with AI. And that's what this course is all about, learning how we do that. Okay, so let's look at creating context. This is an incredibly important topic when it comes to working with AI. We've touched on it at the surface level in the last couple of weeks. Today, we're going to go a lot deeper in understanding what context means. Now, the reason that most people don't get what they want out of AI is because they don't give it the right information. They don't realize the power of context. Once the large language model has the context it needs in order to complete a task, it does a way better job of doing it. The example I use always is if you give it a generic question, it's going to give you generic answers. But if you dig down and give it a lot more specifics, it'll give you a way better answer. And there's a couple of ways that we can actually do that. We don't always need to be able to give it the context. We can actually tell the AI to ask us what it needs to create context. This is incredibly powerful. And one of the things that we'll see here is if you don't give AI permission to do something, it generally won't do it. But when you start giving it permission to do things, you get way better results. And we're going to jump into that and have a look at how that works. So what we're going to do right now is I want you to go to your AI role plan, and I want you to choose a deliverable from that role plan. And doesn't matter which one, just pick one of the role plan items at random. And I want you to, we're going to copy this prompt from your document. And as we're working through this, I want you to notice we've got a couple of things here in brackets. Most of the time when I give you a simple prompt like this, where it's got insert something here, before you submit this to the AI, you do need to actually insert that deliverable item here. Okay, so let's go. I'll give you a second to go and grab your role plan document and open up your AI window. Now, if you want to, you can go back to the black belt session that you were using last time. This keeps a lot of context. We don't particularly need that, but you're welcome to do that. Okay, and so we're going to just copy the prompt and paste that. Don't submit it yet. And now we're going to delete this. And we are going to type in one of your role deliverables. Gathering customer feedback is the one that I'm going to use here. Okay, so before I jump in and execute that, I want to have a quick look at what we see in this prompt. So you're going to replace the brackets, but I want you to just pause and look at this prompt, and I want you to tell me what things you notice in here that the AI is helping us with. What lessons or prompt tips do you see in this prompt?
Context.
Give me more about that. What sort of context are we doing here?
Like, let me just go back to it. But like context in a specific order. So we're asking it to give context to something that seems pretty nebulous, but and to, yeah, I'm not sure what else beyond I can say about that.
Okay, someone else. Anyone see some lessons or some tips that we might be able to apply to other circumstances?
We're asking the AI to list what it needs from us to provide that deliverable, the last sentence.
Yeah, yeah. So we're actually giving it permission to ask us questions or tell us what would be helpful to it to achieve this goal. Okay, so there's a couple of things here that we learned. First of all, I would like your help in producing ... So what we're doing here is we're telling the AI what we need help with. Now that would seem pretty obvious. This would be an example of maybe a low-level prompt. But remember, when we're talking to AI, we need to narrow it into the area that we want to work in. So giving it this introduction of, this is my problem. It now narrows its context down to talk about those issues. It's not going to talk about train schedules. Okay, so we're defining the problem that we want help with. That's the starting point for pretty much every prompt. The next thing you'll notice is before we begin. What are we doing with that? We're giving it sequence. We're telling it the order we want it to do things in. Now, in a single prompt like this, not so relevant. But when we get to the green belt, where we start looking at long prompts, sequence becomes very important. Okay, so we're giving it a little bit of sequence. And the third learning here is that we're asking the AI we're giving it permission to ask us for additional information. Okay, so here we're saying, list the documents or information that you would like to have in order for us to move forward. Okay, now this is probably no different than what you might give to an assistant if you were asking an assistant to do something for you and that assistant knew something about that job. So if Charles goes to Nissi and says, Nissi, can you help me get our monthly percentage of completion analysis done? Let me know what you need from me to make that happen. Okay, that would be a pretty natural conversation, wouldn't it? Nissi knows how to do this. You're just giving her permission, reminding her that she can come back to you if there's something else that she needs she doesn't have access to. Now, the difference between Nissi and AI is that AI won't ask unless you give it permission. I know Nissi, she would ask. She would hound Charles for the information without being told to, okay? But AI is not that blunt. AI won't ask questions unless you give it permission to do so. So this is a really important learning as we're building out our prompts to say, ask me questions. Okay, so we're going to jump back into the AI. And I'm going to post this. I want you to do the same thing. Remember, you're going to post the prompt in and you're going to replace those brackets with one item from your role plan. And we're going to submit that. It's going to take a second to think on it. Wow. It's asking me for a lot of information. Okay, so at this point, we just gave it a simple question. It's given me 10 things that I could provide it that would help it with this particular task. Not all of these things may be relevant. Now, at this point, I could start, gathering this information and submitting them to ChatGPT and ask it for its next step. We're just going to pause there for a second. Hopefully you guys have all done something similar. One of the ways that we could have made this a little more usable is we could have said, instead of just ask me questions, list the top 5 specific documents or information. We could actually give it limits, and it would actually then sort of summarize this down into maybe 5 things. Asking for 10 things may be a little, too much. Okay, so you can give it limits. So one of the things when we're working with AI is that we often find that editing is easier than creating. Okay, I know for me, if I'm given a blank page and a topic and I'm told to write, sometimes it's like pulling blood out of a stone. You sit there for 30 minutes before you've got the first word on the page. Well, if I was to go to one of my team and I gave them the same task and they wrote it and then they gave it to me, it's much easier for me to edit what I've got than to have to create something from scratch. Now, I might end up totally rewriting that piece, but the cognitive function, that thinking function, that brain work that we do is so much easier if we have a starting point. And this is where AI can be really, really helpful. Okay. We're actually asking AI to do the first draft of a complex task. It's creating context. It's giving us information. And we may then go back to it and say, well, you know what? Maybe that's not what we need. Okay. And so you can iterate and edit as you go to refine the context. So remember that the first result is usually a draft. We are often going to be then adjusting that result because editing is easier than creating. Okay, so now we're going to take the next step in our plan here. We're going to take this prompt to our AI and we're going to ask it to generate answers for the context based on what you already know. Now, this is a bit of a meta task, but we've just asked it to give us questions and now we're asking it to guess at the answers. Okay, now this is just a shortcut so that we don't have to do something here. But again, notice what we're doing here. We're giving it an instruction. It's remembering the context based on our previous sessions because in my case, I've opened up the black belt training from last time. So it's got some context about who I am and what I do. And we're also giving it permission. If you don't know the answer, make a guess. Okay, so I want you to go and grab that from your assets document. And we're going to paste that into our chat window and submit it. Now we'll just scroll that all the way to the end. I'm not too concerned about its content here. Now, this doesn't look too different than some of the things that I've already asked it for. Your answers may be a little different. You can see here it's mentioning Xero in QuickBooks. Well, that's because it knows who I am and what I do. We've already given it some context previous to today. Okay.
Where
So
do I find that prompt, Peter?
should be in the asset document. Mahan posted that in the chat. And that's the title was Create Draft of Context.
The first one's in there. I don't see the second one in there.
Yeah, it's the second to top.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, create draft of
Okay.
context.
I see it now.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, again, all we're doing here is we're letting the AI establish some context before we take it to this next step, which is going to allow us to get more specific. Okay, so again, run that if you haven't done it already. Browse through the results. I'm not too worried about what it's giving us at this point. Now we're going to gather our context a little bit more. So what you could do here is open up a document or folder and look at the questions that it's given you, and you could answer as many questions as you can. You don't need to be perfect. Shorter answers are fine. AI will fill in a remarkable amount of detail based on what you give it. And then you could paste that back into the AI. Now, we're not going to do anything on this right now, but just remember that, you know, when we're asking these questions, we can now use an external document, gather our feedback. One of the reasons I say that is that, you know, when you're working in the AI prompt here, if you hit enter, it's going to submit that prompt. So if you have to respond to a number of these items, well, that gets really, really difficult in this tiny little window here. And every time you hit enter, it's going to submit it and you're going to go, no, I'm not ready yet. Here's more information. And so it gets a little cumbersome. So this is where you may want an external document to answer some of these questions. Then you can simply copy and paste them into the prompt. The other thing that you can do when you're dealing with a large block of information is use Shift Enter inside the prompt section here. And that will tell the system this is not a submit. This is just a, you know, next line kind of thing. And it handles that very, very well. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to just keep going through our copy and paste exercise, mostly because we just don't want us to slow it down too much here. We're going to now look at letting AI create prompts for you. So one of the things that we know is that AI knows itself really well. It's the best prompt engineer you can have. Okay, and so yeah, you may have heard that you've got to learn to be a great prompt engineer. Well, it's not totally true, because you already know the best prompt engineer on the planet. You're using it. It's going to tell you what a good way to get the right information out of it. So we have to learn, how do we ask the questions the right way so it gives us really good prompts if we want to create that process map with AI prompts to help us along the way. Okay, so we're going to now take what is quite a long prompt, and you'll notice, so before we go in, I want to just pause here, and we want to look at this prompt and say, what are some of the things that we learn from this prompt that we haven't seen in our previous examples? So take a second, read through the screen, and tell me what insights you are learning from the way this prompt has been written. So what do you notice in here? Maybe we've already seen it before, maybe it's new to you. So the first thing is, going back to what we talked about earlier, tell the AI what sequence you want. We're giving it sequential instructions. We're telling it the order you want it to do things in. We've also got, from what we saw last week, we've got an example of sample output. We'll talk more about how we format sample output in the Greenbelt, but we can tell it, this is what we want you to this is how we want you to deliver the information. Okay. We're also giving it permission to ask us questions. If outside context is required, use brackets, insert something here to let me know. So we're giving it permission as it's building the prompt to ask for more questions. Okay. And in this particular case, we're also telling it to create a prompt that can be used by a large language model. So you see here, create the step-by-step prompts to have the LLM create the first draft. So this is a little bit different than what we may have done in our Grey Belt session, where we said create an SOP. What we're asking for now as part of that SOP is we're saying, tell me how I ask you to help me with the step. What prompt could I use? And so we're creating our own copy and paste exercise so that when we're ready to do this in real life, we're able to say, right, grab this prompt, paste it in, insert, replace the blanks, and run the prompt. Okay, and it's going to help us build its own context on the fly. Okay, so I want you to go and find your document. I want you to copy, this is the really long one under the heading create the prompts. Make sure you copy all the way down. And I think, I wonder if I'm missing some stuff. That goes all the way down to make it at least 10 steps in the document. I might not have all of that shown on the screen. Okay, so copy that to the clipboard and go back to your ChatGPT session and paste that in. Now, we don't need to replace the brackets here because this is part of an example. So the brackets actually have a function right there. We don't need to edit this. Okay. So when you've done that, submit it. It's picking up a different task than the one I was just talking about. So I obviously missed a step somewhere of giving it the information I wanted. Okay, so here you can see step 1, step 2, copy and paste this prompt. So it's put it in quotes, and you can see that it's giving me the exact quote or the exact prompt that we would then submit back to ChatGPT in a separate session to be able to work on this task. And if we were to pause and go and read through each of these prompts, we'd probably see, we can see here explanation or sequential instructions. We'll probably see areas where it is allowing it to ask questions. And I want to slow this down because it'll take too long for us to get through our session. But here you
I
can
have
see,
a question, Pete.
sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
It says if outside context is required, use insert here. What is it if outside context is required? What
If it needs more information, then tell me what information you want me to get you. That's what that's saying. So when it says insert brackets here, it's
Mhm.
going to fill in those. This is an example. This is why we don't change it right now, because when it's going to say insert your monthly financials here.
Oh.
Okay, so
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah, so again, this is a little higher level. This is not asking it to do something. This is telling it how to ask us to do something. Okay, so this particular prompt is or sequence is designed to help AI create a prompt for a specific task. So you can see here, it's got all the way through to these 10 steps of this particular task. And for each step, it's giving me a prompt that I could copy and paste into ChatGPT and then issue them in sequence in order to go through the step. Now, we might look at these and go, oh, yeah, and especially as we start testing with them and say, this is not helpful for what I want to do. We can now go back and iterate and say, hey, about step 8, we need to edit this to allow for, give it whatever your concern is, please redraft this prompt. And it'll go out and redraft that prompt for you. Okay, so this is where you can iterate with within ChatGPT and have it improve the work that it does. So that was just a quick example of a script that we use to create prompts. And as we're thinking about how do I go from a task that I do myself to a task that AI helps me with, this is going to be a very important skill to ask AI, what prompts could I use as part of this process? Okay, so step 1 was to create the list of steps. And then step 2 was to ask AI to create prompts that help us analyze each step and ask for additional information if necessary. And then finally, we're going to talk about AI as its own reviewer. Now, this is actually pretty phenomenal, works in almost any space you're using AI. Just like with a human, the first draft you get is usually not the best quality. It does a pretty good job on its first attempt, but we know it can always do better. Okay, so some people think it does about a 60% job on its first pass. It's like giving it to a staff member, you get something back, and now you got to spend some time editing and rewriting to make it more appropriate. You can get a lot of this iteration done just by interacting with it and telling it what you like or don't like. However, there's actually a faster way to improve it by asking AI to self-review and improve. But there's a structure to do that. So let's have a look at this prompt. I want you to take a second, read through the screen, and ask yourself, what kinds of things are we trying to achieve here? What are the tips that we could learn that we could reuse on another example? So take a second to read through that. So what do you see? Well, there's a couple of things here that are a little new to us that we might want to pick out. What are some of the things you see happening in this prompt?
It's checking its own work. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
tell me, Kathy, where is it checking its own work?
So, so you're asking for the assessment, and then you're asking it to go back over it and look at the,
Yeah.
and make suggestions as to how can we do this better.
Yes. So it's checking its own work. And in the second prompt, so there's actually a multi-step process happening here. If we just tell AI to check its own work, it won't know how to do that. So we actually have to give it instructions on how we want it to check its own work. So the first thing that we've done is we've told it, you are acting as an expert in AI prompt engineering. Now, this seems really subtle, but it's really important. What we're able to have the large language model do is change hats. Right now, up to now, it's been writing it effectively as you. But now we want it to change hats. We want it to now not think of you as the business owner, but think of itself now as a expert prompt engineer. We can do this with marketing copy. We can ask it to write copy as a expert copywriter, and then we can ask it to review the copy as a marketing editor. Okay, so by giving it what expert role do you want it to do, you help define the context and narrow down what it's looking at. I just did a free form prompt the other day, and I had a text query. So I went into ChatGPT and I asked my text query, and it gave me an answer. Is this deductible? And it was an income item, and I asked, is this taxable? And it said, no, it's not. And it gave some information. And then I thought to myself, I wonder what it would say if I started with, you are an expert in Canadian corporate tax. And then I gave exactly the same prompt after that as I did the first time. And its answer was actually quite different. First of all, it came up and it said, yes, it is a taxable income, but it actually gave me a much better rationale for why that is taxable. Now, it turns out the answers were actually compatible with each other, but I just thought it was ironic that the first one said no, the other one said yes. They actually ended up in the same place if you followed it through correctly. But by giving it more context as to what hat should I be wearing, you actually get a more thorough answer. You can use that in any prompt. In fact, I start this now in any prompt I send to ChatGPT. If I'm just free-forming prompts, the first thing I tell it is, who are you and what are you doing? Okay. Also, we saw earlier, we said that you can tell ChatGPT what you need help with. So we said here, my goal. So by telling it your goal, you make it clear what your outcome needs to be. Okay. So we've said the goal. We've said, what is the expert mode that you want to be in? And then we're asking it to critique its own work. Now, this is done in a number of steps. So first, we actually create a rubric. So we've actually said, evaluate the prompts with this criteria. If we don't give it a criteria, it might not know how to evaluate the prompts. So this is part of the learning that we're going to do. And how do you know how to create a rubric? You can ask AI. It's pretty good. It'll actually give you some ideas, and then you can edit that and then use that as part of your prompt. It'll do a pretty good job if you don't give it a rubric, but giving it a rubric really helps structure its thought process and structure its output. So we're giving it a rubric, 25 points for clarity, 25 points for comprehensiveness. We've given a little definition of what this item means, 20 points for sequential flow, 15 points for expert integration, 15 points for usability. So we've given it the standard by which we want it to evaluate. Then we ask it for a detailed list of improvement suggestions. So we're not asking it to redo the work. We're saying, based on this analysis, make some suggestions. And we're telling it a little bit more detail on how to make those suggestions. And then when you're done, ask me if you'd like to run the next draft. Okay, so it's not going to go ahead and just give me the output. We've said, again, this is a sequencing instruction. When you've done with this analysis, ask me if I'd like to run the next draft. Okay, so we're going to copy all of that. It's under the get feedback section in your document. We're going to take that into our session and simply paste it and execute. Now, if you're like me, we've got 10 different steps and prompts in the process. This might, be a lot of information. I'm not going to roll through this. I'm just going to pause here and show you what it's done. So for the first step, it's evaluated the clarity, the comprehensiveness, the sequential flow, the expert integration, and the usability. It's come up with a suggestion on how it could improve those ratings for the prompt. And it's actually given me the suggested revised prompt. Okay. And if we let that run all the way through, you'll see it's done that, or is doing that, for all 10 of the steps. So have a quick browse through yours, see if it's keeping to that same criteria and coming up with a revised prompt. Now, an interesting test might be for you to go back and compare the old prompt to the revised prompt and see if you think it actually is better. We won't go through that today for the sake of time, but that might be some interesting homework you could do, is to actually compare them and see if the new prompt is in fact better based on the evaluation that it's done. One of the things you'll notice here, it's got to a point and it stopped. This is really annoying when you're working with large things like this. ChatGPT will often pause or skip stuff. I was trying to do something the other day and I wanted 100 examples of something. And it would go 1 to 15, ... 25 to 35, ... It kept skipping stuff in the middle and it would keep pausing and say, do you want me to continue? I'm like, yes, I want you to continue. And it was a little frustrating. So this is something you just have to get used to, is that it might get almost all the way and then you've got to say, yep, continue. Okay, it's thinking again, and now it's finishing the rest of it. So one of the things that we're trying to do with this program is to give you some really good comprehensive examples that you can then reuse later as you're trying to create your own process. Okay, so our focus right now is, how do I help AI give me prompts that will help in a multi-step set of instructions? That's what we're gearing this to. So you can take the same framework and you can apply it to any multi-step structure that you are doing and ask it to give you some suggested prompts that would be helpful. Okay, and then you can start to build your own SOP with AI prompting built in. Okay, let's keep working through this. We're going to recap what we've done today. So here are the prompt lessons that I think we've come up with today. Some of these, yeah, okay. So these are the ones from today's Yellow Belt session. So first of all, ask AI to create a prompt for you. That's the whole essence of what we've been doing today. If you give it the right information, it will tell you how to interact with it. Tell AI what you need help with. That helps narrow down its context. Tell AI what sequence you want. How do you want it to order the things? Very important, especially when you get long prompts. Right now, most of our stuff has been just short batches, so sequence hasn't been too important. But you can see that when we did that last couple where we had much longer prompts, the sequencing of what you want to do first and second and third became relevant. Learning number 4, ask the AI to tell you what it needs to create the context or to ask you questions. If you don't give it permission to do this, it won't do it, and you won't get as good of an answer. Number 5, give it feedback on context, or copy the results to another document, edit the results, and then paste it back into the AI. It will now update its context so that your next prompt will be more thorough. You can build multiple steps or instructions into a single prompt. We've seen that already. Instead of just giving a single line, you can insert multiple lines with sequence. Tell AI what its expertise is in. Okay, you are an expert prompt engineer. It's going to help focus it on its output. And you can ask the AI to critique its own work and give specific feedback on improvements, and then ask it to revise its draft, taking into account the suggested improvements. Now, on this example here, I didn't complete the process. I got here to, would you like me to run the next draft of these prompts for you? So we can say yes, and it's now going to redo that original SOP list with the revised prompts that have come up in the analysis. And this is a really good exercise because now we can simply copy and paste the final report rather than having to go through and pick out the different pieces from the, the analysis section that it did. Okay, and that was one of the sequential prompts that we put into that script. At the very end was ask me if you'd like me to summarize it all together. And now it's going to do that. Remember that when you're working in ChatGPT, you can simply copy and paste, just like you do in most other documents. Or there's a little copy button down here. This will copy it in markup format. So sometimes the output's not always the best, but it is a quick way to grab everything that it's included in that document or in that last response. Okay, so before we go on, let's just reflect on these prompt lessons. This is really the meat and potatoes of what we've been doing today. What are your reflections or thoughts on the 8 different elements that we've learnt as part of this sequence today? What's exciting? What's puzzling?
I like that the way you can have it structured specifically to what your needs are, that you can tell it, oh, you want it sequential, you want it check its own work. The whole thing is just pretty cool. Yeah. And what's more important to you, if it's more clarity and comprehensive, or if the sequential part, which part of that is most important to it. So I suppose if you dump it on its head, it'd come up with a little bit different focus on what the output is.
If you take any 2 or 3 of these little learnings that we're getting here, you could use those to just create your own prompt at will. Okay, so you might have something that you want to just do. It's a one-off task. Well, you could take these learnings, you just freeform them into a GPT session, shift enter between each of those points and run it and go, wow, it actually, based on these little elements that I've given it, it's created a really good process. It's asking me the right questions. It's giving me the right output. Okay, so yeah, that's one of the reasons why I summarize these prompt lessons for you, because this helps us recollect what is it that AI can do for me, and how do I best use it. I tell it what I want help with, right? That seems intuitive, but sometimes we don't make it very specific. We're pretty vague. Okay, we're asking it to do something, but we're maybe not telling it the context in which that exists. Okay, so again, really helping to go deeper into how do we get the best results. What else, Chris? What's really important for you here?
The feedback, I think, because the more, like you said, expert level, the more that I can ask AI to define things and be able to break it down for me and be able to copy paste and keep templates. I like that because it's going to help processes a lot.
Yeah. Charles, what stands out the most for you here?
I really like how it started to give feedback to itself through the scoring system you created. And it's become an expert of itself. I was very it's almost Inception, right? It's very interesting.
It's actually quite scary sometimes when you've got a sequence of these commands where it's going backwards and forwards. It's like you're talking to yourself, and I hope one of you's winning, kind of thing, because it's bouncing these ideas. So here's my list now. Now I've just reviewed what you've given me, and now I've given you a final version, and now I've done this, and it's like, okay, like at what point am I needed in this discussion? Well, that's the truth.
That's
you might not be needed in this discussion. Yeah, so it can be a little scary to watch sometimes. Okay, well, perfect, wonderful. Emily has had to go and catch a flight, so hopefully that was all successful for you, Emily, and you can let us know next week which of these ideas has the most impact for you. So, what are your next steps out of today's class? Okay, so what we want you to do is to continue to explore your role plan deliverables. Want to keep fleshing that out a little bit. Find one or two that you want to work on and go through this prompt chain and put in your role plan deliverables. Have a play with this sequence and see what you can do to come up with that list of supporting prompts that will help you to create a that swim lane matrix that we saw at the beginning. Okay, you'll get a copy of that image in the handout as well that I'll send to you today or tomorrow. So yeah, make sure that you practice with those role plans. You don't need to follow the prompt chain. I'm not asking you to now go and execute it in and of itself. If you can, wonderful. But our learning objective for today is really to play around with generating prompts, letting the AI tell us what prompts might be useful so that we can create an SOP or a set of instructions that can be executed separately. Okay, that was our learning objective for today. Let AI be its own prompt engineer. How do I help it do that? Okay, so have a play around with that. Don't forget to please submit your transformation report to get your certification. So you go into your Simple Academy account, go to the black belt sidebar, click on submit certification for the yellow belt, and then go through the process of uploading a quick video showing what you've achieved in the session. And that is it. Are there any questions or things you'd like to clarify for today?
Not at the moment.
No. Okay.
A lot of, I'm sure tomorrow I will.
Look, these classes are a bit of a fire hose. This is why we give you the handout at the end of the day with, to summarize the learnings, why you've got those prompts in a Word document, because what we really want you to do is to start to play with these prompts, play with these ideas. The more you use them, the more ways you'll find to use them. As Chris has already found, you get into it, you scratch the surface, and bang, 5 new ideas come out.
Yeah.
Okay? So yeah, this is what we want you to be able to do and continue to learn and experiment with this. Okay, fantastic. Well, I will see you all next week for our blue belt. The topic for our blue belt, sorry,
Orange belt?
Orange belt next week. Using AI as our cognitive super assistant. Help us to think. It's going to be very interesting. Okay, I look forward to seeing you next week.
Hey, thank you, Peter.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.